Before I give the call to the Honourable Nigel Hallett, I remind honourable members that it is the honourable member's first speech, and therefore it is not appropriate that one should interject. The Honourable Nigel Hallett.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great pleasure to stand before this chamber and deliver my maiden speech. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to extend my congratulations on your election as President of this chamber. It gives me great honour and pride to have been firstly selected by the Liberal Party and secondly, and importantly, supported by the electors of the South West region, a total area of 44,518 square kilometres. I'd like to recognise and pay tribute to my family, my wife Susan and my two sons Ian and Michael. My mother Grace is also here today in the gallery. My late father Tom was a person of great ideals, honesty and integrity. My parents were married for over 50 years and I had an upbringing of which I am proud. Their moral guidance, support and friendship helped shape me as an individual. Both of my parents were born in the UK, both served in World War II, Dad in the Middle East, Borneo and New Guinea. And it was here my father forged a lifelong friendship with Keith McKinnon, father of Barry, a former State Minister and opposition leader of our parliamentary Liberal Party. My parents were typical of their time, both committed to a stable home and providing opportunities to have a better life. Both lived through the Great Depression of 1929. The consequences of this I did not fully appreciate in my youth. And through my parents, the person who I learned to admire for his achievements was a former Premier in Sir David Brand. Sir David was born in Dongra and came from an early farming family at Mullawa. When World War II broke out, he enlisted in the army. Shortly after, the newly formed Liberal Party was founded in 1944. Sir David won the seat of Greenock in 1945, and in fact he was the first parliamentary member of the new Liberal Party in Australia. Under his premiership, there was unprecedented industrial development in the state, including the development of the Kwinana Industrial Strip, the standard gauge railway from Kalgoorlie to Kwinana, mining in the Pilbara, and progress on the Ord River scheme. My father was allocated a small farm in Bridgetown through the War Service Land Settlement Scheme, and this is where my brother and I were raised. My education at both primary and high schools commenced in Bridgetown and later at Hampton Senior High School in Perth. I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to have a career in farming. My brother David and I worked together in a partnership for 15 years. In the middle to late 1980s, interest rates were in excess of 20%. For a lot of small businesses, there were opportunities to expand. However, the financial uncertainty was a limiting factor for many. I believe there was an opportunity for expanding the family business and chose Corrigin. And ironically, the farm was once owned by the late member for Canning, Jack Hallett. At the time, there was some financial pressure, but this venture proved to be a successful one for our family. Farming has a wonderful way of teaching a person so many life skills through everyday challenges. And the 80s were a fantastic time to be part of the state's rural development. Having a young family, my wife and I experienced the difficulties of such things as not having a doctor on call and having to travel long distances for medical assistance. As country people, there was also the impact of dealing with isolation and single personalities in a small school, and then the division of the family, with children moving to the metropolitan area for secondary schooling. Having been fortunate to experience both city and country lifestyles, I have recognised that no matter where people live, they have a right to expect equal access to quality education, health and police services, and they have a right to have well-maintained roads. We need to change this government's city-centric approach and ensure provision of fundamental services to rural and remote areas. There are many issues facing the region and many more ongoing problems, typically resultant from a lack of understanding and action. Agriculture is an industry that has been neglected by successive governments over many years. Apart from the severe population decline in the bush, we are now witnessing a government that cannot develop initiatives and make decisions. And an example of this can be found in exceptional circumstances legislation that has affected many of our northeastern wheat growers and associated businesses. The time taken to evaluate the seasonal needs of these small businesses is appalling. Anybody who knows the industry can tell you by September whether or not the season has failed. And why are we as a state still negotiating with our federal counterparts in May of the following year? A state government can and should take a far more proactive role in this area. It is a reasonably easy solution. And another area that I must comment on is our dairy industry. Whilst losing approximately 30% of the state dairy farmers through record low prices, the processors are also finding the going tough. I cannot find a winner in this current outcome. The appropriate marketing bodies must help in identifying niche and expanding markets to the benefit of WA businesses. And look at China, for example. There is a serious shortage of milk supply in China, where the average individual consumption is 25 kilos per annum. In comparison, the world average is 100 kilos. And Australia's consumption is a whopping 381 kilos per person per annum, amongst the highest in the world. China is importing every available dairy cow suitable for the domestic needs from Australia. Last year, 60,000 head. Unfortunately, this is to the benefit of cattle producers in the short term. However, to benefit the industry in the long term, producers must be provided with the opportunity to export dairy products without jeopardising the lineage of their herd. Agriculture needs leadership and stability. A successful initiative of the previous Liberal government was the infill sewerage program, which was designed to move societies away from outdated and environmentally damaging waste disposal methods. The program had tangible benefits to the community, but has been sadly neglected by the Gallop government to the detriment of smaller towns. Yet it subscribes to being a government which is interested in the environment. We've also seen Labor's lack of resolve to projects such as the Peel deviation. Constant delays illustrate Labor's lackadaisical and irresponsible approach to infrastructure development. The need for this is urgent. On a normal day, at least 30,000 vehicles a day go through Dawesville, creating severe bottlenecks and unnecessary driver angst. It's only a matter of time before a serious accident occurs on this dangerous, choked-up road system. Expressions of interest for the deviation need to be called. The Minister should make this project a priority by calling on Main Roads to initiate the tender process instead of dilly-dallying and waiting another 12 months, which is too often the case. There's also been a remarkably similar lack of desire to do anything about Geograph Bay. This bay is very important in relation to West Australia's health and economy. There are a number of areas of concern: pollution, erosion, increase in pressure from growing recreational and professional needs of the community, and various outdated methods of fishing. All types of trawling and net fishing should be banned with the exception of crab drop nets. Aquaculture should be allocated much more research and development, support which will ultimately lead to more sustainable fish stocks. We should also consider the creation of more artificial reefs to improve the marine environment and the quality of the fishing experience in Geograph Bay. South Australia, New South Wales and the Northern Territory have seen massive turnarounds in King George whiting and other fish species, in particular barramundi, when they took effective and responsible action in dealing with similar problems. This has generated huge increases in tourism alone, and I seek a bipartisan support in preserving the quality of Geograph Bay for all users well into the future. Mr. President, you may not be aware the southwest region extends from just north of Mandurah to just east of Albany. It contains 3 cities: Mandurah, Bunbury and Albany. The region has a population which is heading towards 250,000 people. The region is amongst, if not, the fastest growing of all in Australia. The southwest has a broad economic base covering agriculture, forestry, mineral extraction, processing and manufacturing, fishing, tourism and retailing. And I'll give you some examples of income derived in the 2002-2003 financial year. Mineral extraction, mining and processing, 2.2 billion. Retail, 1.9 billion. Tourism, 588 million. Agriculture, 493 million. Mineral sands, 305 million. And trade through the Bunbury port of some 12 million tonnes. And when you consider that these figures do not cover the entirety of the economic story of the southwest region, you can see the importance not only for this region, but for the future and prosperity of all Western Australia. This state needs the commitment of a government that understands and wants to see these areas develop and prosper. Why is it so difficult to get basic infrastructure such as roads, a reliable power grid and a water supply that would stop towns such as Manjimup, Bridgetown and Boyart Brook being on drastic water restrictions? Why is this government continuing with another grossly inefficient and time-consuming feasibility study? The issues and the expertise to rectify these problems have been there for some time. Yet the state government has never recognised this or seized the opportunity available. In a time of record revenue collection and a booming state economy, real infrastructure growth is a necessity that will carry Western Australia through the next decade. There are no excuses for delays or shortfalls with the predicted economic growth and population increase. Let us look at stamp duty on vehicles and housing. How many people are aware that Western Australians are choosing to purchase vehicles outside this state because the Gallop government imposed stamp duty is so excessive? Stamp duty on housing, one of the highest in Australia, creates windfall treasury surpluses that are not being used for the benefit and development of Western Australia. When you look into recent history and to the British government, at a time when Maggie Thatcher took over from James Callaghan's Labor government, she reduced the top tax rate by 20% and actually collected more tax. And although her actions seem counter-initiative, they highlight the fact that when government let people get on with working and make a decent living and stay out of everyday life, more revenue will be generated. Payroll tax is an abhorrent tax, imposed in a manner that strangles businesses' incentive to grow their workforce. Compounding this structural problem is the fact that revenue gained has not been reinvested in the industry and training of skilled labour. There's been much talk in recent months of the lack of skilled workers in Australia. And once again, I call on bipartisan support in this House to abolish this tax, consequently encouraging businesses and industry to divert their revenue from unfair taxation to skilling and expanding their workforce. And whilst on apprenticeships, it is time to look and revisit these schemes. Apprenticeships need overhauling. They need to be tailored to fit the individual and based on competency, not time served. Students have a greater understanding of modern technology, and this combined with greater flexibility and access to information has created a generational shift that to date has not been accounted for in the education system. Apprenticeships are just as valuable as a university degree, and this is the message that Dr. Brendan Nelson, the Federal Minister for Education, Science and Training, has been sending. We now have the difficult task of convincing a generation of secondary students and their parents that apprenticeships are valued and needed by society. This preconceived notion of inadequacy is quite amazing, considering that a majority of Western Australia's wealth is derived from the mining, oil and agricultural activities which immediately come to mind and are heavily dependent on tradespeople. I would also like to briefly touch on tourism. Approximately 600,000 tourists a year visit Western Australia. This figure is a small increase on the previous year, but below the national growth average. And why is this, one might ask? Towns such as Mandurah, Busselton, Margaret River and Dunsborough experience population blowouts during holiday destination time, without being provided with adequate resources to cope with demand. What provisions are being made through infrastructure development to handle these ever-increasing numbers? And I suggest very little. The road between Yallingup and Augusta has claimed many lives over years, yet it still remains substandard. The ever-increasing heavy vehicle traffic on the South West Highway between Donnybrook and Manjimup is creating a potential traffic disaster, and as we've all tragically witnessed in recent weeks. We have to recognise that trucks are an essential part of our economy. The driver's professionalism and dedication stands testament to the rig operators that support so many West Australian families and businesses. Governments at all levels need to work cohesively to provide safer and more strategic road systems to counter ever-increasing traffic volumes and cater for all road users. Many tourist owners and operators are experiencing difficulty with large increases in tax rates on caravan parks and public liability on recreational activities. Governments at all levels should be promoting such businesses and not use these enterprising people as mules for the Treasury. Western Australia's greatest resource is our young people. Youth today face greater challenges and opportunities than ever before. To assist them, we must continually develop programs to ensure the growth of Western Australia. We must encourage them to set goals, to embrace the principles of family and family life, to take part in communities and be part of community life, so that inextricable decline in social capital is reversed and a contribution for future generations is made. In closing, there are a number of people I must acknowledge for their support, time and experience in my political journey, which began in 1996. My wife Susan endured the rigours of Labor Party political life. As a former Senior Vice President of the Liberal Party, she supported my endeavours. My two sons, thank you both for your understanding. My thanks extend from the Kinnan family to my Divisional President in Charlie Martella, the Honourable Jeff Prosser, Member for Forest, Michelle Riley, who ran my campaign, Divisional stalwarts, the Honourable Muriel Patterson, Judy Johnson, Garth Hammond, Craig Caboni, and my new colleague in Troy Buswell, Member for Vass, and current Member for Leschnock, Dan Sullivan, Bob and Leonie Maslin, Faye Dudar and Gary Beckett. The last person, but certainly not the least, is former State President of the Liberal Party and now Senator for Western Australia, David Johnston. I've been to many parts of the state with David, and he's always been ready to give encouragement and advice. Our friendship has grown in respect over time and is one that I place great value. In closing, Mr. President, I congratulate all new members in this, the 37th Parliament of Western Australia. The reason why we are all here is to achieve a better outcome for Western Australia and all its people. It is a role that I embark on with great pride. It is truly a humbling experience to represent the South West region in the West Australian State Parliament.